Hi guys, and welcome back. My name is Lindsay. I'm the Housewife Historian, and I have been listening and reading your comments, and I have some people that had commented they really miss me on YouTube, and you know what? I miss you guys on YouTube too. So I'm going to start putting some more time and energy into my YouTube channel and getting you guys some content over here instead of the small clips that I clip from TikTok because I love you guys. I loved my Housewives community over here on YouTube, and so I would love to reconnect with all of you. A lot has happened. I was very active on YouTube for a while, and then my account got a strike against it, demonetized over some housewives drama. That's always seems to be the thing that happens. So if you guys know me, I've been doxxed, I've had my accounts demonetized, I've been hacked, I've been through the ringer. Okay. Now I have a Patreon. Anything that is is going to put me in jeopardy of having that kind of backlash, it's going on the Patreon. I'm so sorry. You guys know that I'm a big supporter of free content. I know that times are hard. I know that money is tight, and I understand all of that. And I would love nothing more than to make everything free. But unfortunately, the attacks that come sometimes by the content and the information, the tea that I have to put it behind a paywall. Like there's just no other option for me to protect myself. And it is, additional work and stuff, but mostly it's simply just to protect myself. So just wanted to get that out the way for you guys. Let's get into this. Today we're talking Real Housewives of Potomac, Wendy and Eddy. Now, there's a lot of things that are standing out to me as red flags. I want to know what your guys' thoughts are, obviously, in the comments. Everything in this video is alleged for educational purposes only. And a quick recap, if you don't know what's going on in Potomac, Wendy and Eddy, the professor and the lawyer, have been arrested on felony charges of insurance fraud. Now, the allegations are that a year and a half ago, not last April, a year and a half ago, they came back from an extravagant vacation in Jamaica, allegedly to their bedroom being ransacked. They called the police. The police came. The police were suspicious from the get-go, which is a little suspicious to me that they were suspicious. I can only think that is, I can only contribute that to the likelihood that they probably live in a very, very safe community where people's homes don't get burglarized, only because we now know that one of Wendy's neighbors actually sent a DM to Tamara from the Real Housewives of Orange County. And she said that the neighbor said they all suspected insurance fraud when they heard the news that their home had been burglarized. So hearing that makes me understand that likely the police were suspicious because of the fact that, again, they're in a super safe neighborhood. This isn't happening. This isn't, it's not something that happens very often. The police said during they did a live, I guess, press conference, if you will, that they were suspicious, but they continued to treat it as if it was a regular, burglary, and that they did a walkthrough on how they thought that the burglary happened, which they thought they must have brought a ladder, I guess, climbed the ladder to the second story and entered the home through a bathroom window. I guess they had to step on the toilet to do that, and when they did, the cops left, debris, grass, dirt, what have you, on the toilet from, walking and then coming in through the window. And they said that it was odd to them that the burglars hadn't left any sort of, anything behind, but that when they came through the window, that it was like, for whatever reason, if they had to walk through mulch or whatever, that it would be almost impossible to do that and not bring some sort of like dirt and debris into the home, was one of their first flags to them. It's what they stated. Okay. We come to find out that they made like 3 different claims, that things on the list were valuables that they had returned. One, for example, was a Gucci wallet from 2018 that was returned 2 weeks later and fully reimbursed. Email exchanges between Eddy and Wendy, where Eddy's saying, hey, do you have any other expensive items that we can add to this inventory? I want to get us, to the maximum 450 some thousand that our insurance allots for us. I mean, the fact is that they literally put this together it's so amateur that it's almost unbelievable that they could be so messy, right? Now, a lot of people speculating over that they're in debt. I do think that they're in debt. They didn't have a home, they didn't buy a home until shortly when she was about to join the Real Housewives of Potomac. They both do have very elite, degrees and educations, but you know what that equals? A lot of college loan debt. That's what that equals, a lot of college loan debt. But like people have said in the press, and I've seen bloggers and people saying, Wendy was never known as that girl that, that was bringing us all the high-end fashion or driving the fancy whips. She wasn't known for any of those things per se. So the pressure of keeping up with the lifestyle just kind of doesn't vibe exactly. I saw one creator who had mentioned that he thought that it was them trying to like puff up the numbers on their cannabis business. And I'm going to say that that is probably more on the agenda than anything, only because I think Wendy has been like laying the lines for that this year. If you saw in her confessional, I think it was like the second episode, she says, how lucrative the cannabis business has been for Eddy, and you see he's telling the kids how his business has expanded to 5 states and it's growing and yada, yada, yada. And that really, truly, like I said, I think that makes the most sense. But here are the things that I don't understand that are major red flags to me. One of those things is the fact that they didn't know this indictment was coming. Okay, Eddy's a lawyer. He's in the legal community. If there's one thing about the clerk of courts, the legal people, lawyers, like they know what's going on usually before it even happens most of the time. So it's very, very peculiar that in an area that big area, sure, but probably a smaller legal community, that they didn't have word in the pipeline that this was coming down, right? It is almost as if it would be the same as if they went and burglarized a home and brought all of the stolen goods back to their house and never thought for once that the police could come with a warrant to arrest them or go through their belongings. She wore a ring. I think it was like their anniversary ring. When they came back from vacation, they made their initial claims. They told the insurance company that they did not have their anniversary bands with them, or they had them with them on vacation. Then, like a couple of weeks later, they turn around and make the claim that they didn't have the rings, and then boom, Wendy pops up on her social media at a dinner at the White House Correspondents, and she's wearing the ring, right? So it's like blatantly disrespectful to the police when people do things like that. And it says to me, like, is your ego that big, or do you really think that you are above? You have the audacity to believe that you are above the that you don't even have to try to cover up these crimes. It doesn't make sense to me. It's not like they were under pressure. It's not like this sporadically happened and they had to cover it up. They planned it, right? So if you planned it, wouldn't you cover your footsteps? It's hard to comprehend. Another thing, Eddy is in the legal community. He's a lawyer. Typically, when you have children, you don't want both parents being incriminated with the same sort of charges, right? We saw that with Teresa and Joe Giudice. Joe Giudice was going to be the one that was going to take the fall for everything and go to prison, and Teresa was going to get probation and go home and take care of the kids. The reason that she ended up going to prison was because during their trial, their financial papers and documents that had been entered into evidence but requested by the court and the prosecutors and such were finagled. They found, that they hadn't, they had to have an audit done, and they had left expensive things like four-wheelers and such off of the audit. The judge found that disrespectful and, made a statement that is essentially why Teresa ended up serving prison time, and she made sure that Teresa went to prison. She felt like they were, didn't have any respect for the law. Regardless, initially, the plan was Joe Giudice takes the fall for everything. He's the one that goes away to prison, and at least Teresa is home with the children. You don't want two people where you're fighting two separate court cases because, again, it's expensive to go to prison. It's expensive to be indicted. It's expensive to go to court. And now you're going to have two big legal cases going on either back to back or at the same time that you're going to have to pay for legal representation for. You're going to have to miss work. There's a lot that comes with this. And so the last thing that you would want is both partners being in trouble, because who does that leave the kids with? Okay, take for example Dorito and PK, right? Hypothetically, if the robberies were planned by somebody, maybe Dorit didn't know and PK did, and he did that to protect them because of this exact situation. If it ever went down, if it was ever found out, if the police ever caught onto it, if somebody were to flip, then he would be the only person that knew what was transpiring and could get in trouble for it. And again, at least leaving Dorit at home with the children, right? At least letting, putting all of your support and energy behind the husband if he's got to go to court and he has to deal with the legal repercussions, right? So you don't ever want both partners to be in trouble at the same time for a situation like this, because if they both go to prison, now you have 3 babies at home that don't have any parents, and you're going to lose everything, right? Teresa and Joe Giudice had the money to have an attorney to at least say, hey, can Teresa go do her 10 months first, leave Joe at home with the kids, and then he'll go away, right? That's not always the case, okay? That's actually was a privilege, and again, because they had money, paid attorneys, that sort of thing, they were able to finagle that. In real life, usually, in average folk, if you have parents or people that have children together, they get in trouble together, they get indicted together, they go to prison together. It's like, I mean, obviously not together because male and female, but you know what I'm saying? Like, the courts don't really care. Like, you're a felon to them. You broke the law. They don't really, you know, it's on to the next for them, right? And so that's what puts them in a really, really, really bad predicament, okay? I told a story, I was doing a live with Krista Marie from Reality T, and I told a story about a really dear, dear, dear friend of mine. She's since passed. Um, her and her husband, lived together. They had a beautiful home, and they had like a little toddler at home. And this was before, recreational growing and such was legal. And the husband was growing like a little plant upstairs in the attic. And it was, when I talk about a baby plant, it was a baby plant. But the way that the wiring and electricity and the things were wired up there, for whatever reason, it ended up catching on fire in the winter. It caught on fire. The roof or the attic caught on fire. So of course, when the fire department comes and they put the fire out, they discover this little tiny marijuana plant, right? And so of course it's guns a-blazing. We're going to arrest you and charge you. And, so they arrest the husband in front of, the wife, and everything is, chaotic. And the police, look at her and they're like, did you know about this, right? And she has to make a quick decision because in her mind, she loves her husband. She doesn't want to see him go down and get in trouble by himself because, you know, of the obvious. And then the other option is say she doesn't know and lie, but at the same time, like, it might have been more beneficial to just let the husband get in trouble, and then she again would at least not have to worry and be home with the child if something were to happen. And again, the money and the costs and the sort of momentum and support that it's going to take for somebody to fight legal felony charges, you know, you don't have to do it twice, do it once, right? But she had such a big heart. She didn't, that didn't even cross her mind. She just saw her husband being arrested and didn't want to see him get in trouble by, like, and so she was like, I didn't know. And they turned around and arrested her and charged her too, right? So this has been, diabolical in a lot of situations, and it doesn't always work out as good as it did for Joe and Teresa, okay? It just doesn't. And thankfully my friend and her husband were able to, I think, get representation, and were able to work out some sort of, I think she did like a treatment in lieu of conviction because she had never been in trouble before, and he was able to do some sort of program, and it ended up working out, thankfully, right? But again, you don't know. You're putting your fate and your future into the hands of the judicial system when these sort of things happen. And they're the ones that are going to be making your life decisions for a couple of years or however long. So, yeah, it doesn't make sense to me. Again, they had the opportunity to plan this out, to talk, to think about it, to research it, to do whatever they needed to do to make sure they didn't get caught. Like, that should have been their number one priority, was not to get caught. And the fact that they made these claims, some of them tried to file, you can only claim your item to one insurance company. You're not allowed to just insure, like, say, your ring from 3 different companies, and if you lose it, you get to get money from all 3 companies. That's not how this works. And so to me, again, the fact that they got denied some of the claims because the insurance companies figured out that there were other claims in the process should have been a red flag that there would be something coming down the pipeline. Again, like, you didn't think that they were going to report that to the authorities? Did you really not think that? And you didn't consider the fact that the authorities could show up at your home a year and a half later arrest you and go through your home and find 12 of the 18 stolen items in your home, like literally just hanging out in your house. That is crazy to me. I don't understand it. It's almost like on one hand, I'm like, did they like go on vacation, spend too much money, get drunk one night, the night before they left, and put this plan together and come home and execute it without really thinking about, what they could do to cover their asses? I don't know. It doesn't make sense. Like I said, you guys, it truly just does not make a lot of sense. Um, Rumors, of course, continue to circulate about their finances and about that Eddy hasn't been a lawyer. They said he hasn't been I don't know if he's a trial lawyer. I don't know enough about what his, um, education and degree and any of, I don't know the details surrounding his career. But regardless, it just, it seems like doesn't make sense. It just doesn't add up. And, I see other people making comments like, oh, this is like the Bravo curse. This is what happens when you go. The fact is, actually, you guys, that's not necessarily the case. Jen Shaw was being investigated 10 years prior to her joining the Real Housewives of Salt Lake City. Okay? 10 years prior. 10 years, okay? And I just let that like sink in a little bit too, because we've had Wendy really, she's always bragged about her education and her 4 degrees and she's a doctor. And it's like, yeah, girl, but you like, if you really want to be honest here, Jen Shaw is outsmarted y'all. You know what I'm saying? Like she was able to do her thing for 10 years before she was finally indicted and charged and prosecuted, and you and Eddy, I guess you got a little bit of money out of it, but at the end of the day, it could not have been worth it, because now the stress alone of having felony indictments over your head, I mean, you just could never know that sort of stress until you have it. Again, that's why I really believe that Wendy and Eddy are both very much in denial, and from their social media posts, I think that, it's hard to comprehend prison. It's hard to comprehend what that's going to look like, feel like, and likely they're just in denial that that's not going to be the case for them, that they will somehow work out some kind of plea deal, something that will, eliminate prison. However, I mean, I don't know if that's going to be the case or not. We know with the feds that they have a 99% conviction rate. Now, what does that mean? That means that 99% of their cases, they get a conviction, okay? What that can also look like is a lot of plea deals, okay? And what a plea deal is where the prosecutor will come to the defendant and say, for your guilty plea, we will drop a couple of these charges, we'll minimize this, we'll let you get good days, we'll shorten your parole, we'll do, whatever. You just need to plead guilty to whatever charges, they decide, and take your punishment, okay? But what happens is the reason that so many people are willing to take these plea deals is because 9 times out of 10 they were over indicted anyways. Now, what does that mean? That means that when they charged you or charged the person, that maybe you were guilty of a burglary, okay? Maybe that's what you were guilty of, but they charged you with a burglary, a breaking and entering, a receiving stolen property, all these other additional charges is what they do. They overcharge you. They charge you with too many charges that they know won't stick, but they do it because it terrifies you, because when you start, each of those charges has a certain amount of time that you could have to go to prison for. So if you have 4 counts and the time frame is 9 to 18 months on each charge, that's looking pretty scary, right? So when the prosecutor comes to you and says, okay, you have 4 charges, we're going to drop 2 of them, okay? We're going to give you 18 months, which is still less time than you would have got even if you got the minimum time on all 4 of them put together, and we're going to do A, B, and C, and you just got to plead guilty. Well, obviously, I mean, that's what, when people say, how do innocent people end up in prison, that this is how they end up in prison. This is exactly how. I know that, one time I was watching a documentary, it's a great example. It was a gentleman, he was fighting with his girlfriend. I don't know what happened. The police get called, and they ended up charging him with, I don't know if he like threatened to like bomb the place. I don't know. There was some kind of threats were made, right? He was a young kid too. I'm talking like 19, 20 years old. Um, and they charged him with like a Homeland Security charge, which is a big deal. Okay. It can be a very big deal and you can serve a lot of time on it. And so when it came time for him to go to court, the prosecutors came to him and said, like, we'll drop this, and we'll give you 6 months. Okay. And so, of course, even though he wasn't guilty, he took the deal because what were his other options? To go to court with this charge and receive a minimum of, a year and a half? Like, he really had no other choice. In the documentary, he ends up going away to a very, very rough federal prison where he is SA'd the first night that he gets there because he's like, I'm from California, like Huntington Beach area. So when we, got to prison and homeboys from Compton were like, yo, who's, from Compton, homeboy? Everybody had people already inside the prison but him because he was coming from a different sort of community and it made him vulnerable and it ended in an essay on him. I think he came home from prison actually and ended up unaliving himself like a year later. And so it was just an example of like, this is what happens. Innocent people do go to prison. Um, People are overcharged and, this is our judicial system and it's not common, right? It's just people that are good people that go to work every day and pay their taxes. They believe the judicial system is fair and just, and they believe that it's about the truth. And unfortunately, that's just not the case. And most people will be blessed enough to never have to deal with the system, and they'll go on believing that until they die, which is, fine. But for other people, it will be an awakening when the person that they love gets in trouble or gets addicted or whatever the case may be. And it becomes quite an eye-opening experience for people's families when they realize what the judicial system really is like and how we really treat, felons and the incarcerated in America. Because it's surely not what most people think. So that was just a little bit of an extra insert, sorry, to get off topic, but you guys know I'm passionate about reform, recovery, reducing recidivism. I'm a recovery coach. I spent 3 years in prison from 2014 to 2017. I'm certified by my state's Board of Mental Health and Addiction Services. I specialize in working with people that have a dual diagnosis of mental health and addiction issues. And so I'm passionate about these things. And I believe, because I think that I was one of those people, until I was in my 20s, I believed that, they wanted that it was about the truth, right? I could tell you endless amounts of stories that not being the case. I mean, it's just not. It really is about that conviction rate. It really is about the politics of it all, the votes, when it's, what is it called? Not voting season, but what is it called? I can't remember. I'm running a blank in my head right now. But anyways, all of those things factor in and make a difference. They really do. So again, Eddy and Wendy, they could be innocent to proven guilty, okay. But the fact of the matter is that the system's not going to be looking at them like they're innocent. When you have 17 felonies, I mean, unless if you're praying for a miracle, you're in trouble, buddy. You're looking at like you're gonna maybe gonna go to prison. Okay. Um, which I commented, Eddy had posted something and I commented and said, like, I'm a recovery coach and I've been to prison. I'm happy to speak with you and your wife if you, have any concerns or questions, because it's not uncommon when really wealthy, rich people know that they're going to prison. They often reach out for sort of like a mentor, somebody like James Leonard was to Teresa to help advise them on the steps and things that they can do beforehand to try to make it as much of a smooth transaction as possible, right? So I would be happy to do that for anyone, obviously. But yeah, so that's the long and short of Eddy and Wendy. I just, I don't always, I'm not always sticking up for the network. I'm always not pro Bravo, but on this sort of situation where people are like, it's Bravo, it's the Housewives, there's a curse, there's this, it's not, honestly. Like I said, Jen Shaw was breaking the law for an entire decade before she came on Housewives, okay? Teresa breaking the law before she came on Housewives, okay? So Tom Girardi once said that his biggest thing that he would tell his clients was never to do reality TV. And then when he didn't take his own advice, when it came to Erica, look at how, he ended up. So just something to think about, guys. A little bit of food for thought. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and make sure that you stay tuned because I have much, much more coming. Like I said, getting back into my YouTube community. I miss you guys. If there's any topics or subjects that you want to hear more on or any questions that you have, make sure that you put it in the comments. If you guys are interested in my Patreon, I think that the link is in my description. If not, I can put it in the comments, or you can look up the Housewife Historian. And then if you're interested in recovery services, if you're having issues, if you're struggling, I have opened up my services to like people that don't have insurance, basically nationwide, to help people. So if you, even for family members that don't know how to support a loved one that may be still sick and suffering, email me, message me. My email is hwhist and the number 2 at gmail.com. I'm happy to help, happy to put you in contact with resources local to you, whatever the case may be. Happy to help. So hope to talk to you guys soon. Leave those thoughts and comments and make sure you hit the like and subscribe button, and we will chat soon. Goodbye.